Hello. I'm so glad that you were able to come and join us today for story time in Fairyland. I'd like to share some of my favorite stories with you. The first one is about a friend of mine, a fairy, who's going to teach you a lesson. Now, my friend was flying by one day, and she saw a lady who, you're not going to believe this, lived in a vinegar bottle. Can you even imagine living in a vinegar bottle? Well, the lady was sitting outside, and she was crying, boo-hoo-hoo. Oh, it's so sad that I have to live in this vinegar bottle. Now, I should live in a little cabin. That would be very nice, and that would be much more suited to me. Boo-hoo-hoo. Well, my fairy friend, who was there at that time, felt really sorry for the little old lady, and she went down to her and she said, listen, this is what you do. Tonight, I want you to go to bed, lay down, go to sleep. Then I want you to stand up, turn around 3 times, lay back down, and in the morning, you'll see what you see. So that's what the old lady did. She went to bed, laid down, went to sleep, got up, turned around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, just like that. And you can do the same thing. Turn around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, there you go. Lay back down, go back to sleep, and in the morning, you'll see what you will see. Well, the next morning, the little old lady got up and, to her surprise, she didn't live in a vinegar bottle any longer. Now she had a fine little cabin. A nice little cabin, all nice, scrubbed clean, with some curtains at the window. Perfect for her. And the fairy, who was very happy about it, went to go flying away. But for sure she did. The little old lady who lived in the vinegar bottle, you're not going to believe, she forgot to say thank you. Well, the fairy didn't pay too much attention to it that time, and she went flying away back to do the things that she would do. North, south, east, and west. She flew all year long. And then she remembered the little old lady that used to live in the vinegar bottle, who now had her cabin, and she thought she would go and visit her. Surely the little old lady would be happy. Well, when she got there, to her surprise and to her dismay, the little old lady was sitting outside of her cabin, crying again. Oh, woe is me, woe is me. I shouldn't just have to live in this little cabin. Why? I should have a nice little townhouse. That's what I should have, a little house that has curtains at the window and flower boxes and a mailbox. That's what I should live in, a little nice house. Well, the fairy said, okay, here's what you do. You go to bed tonight, lay down, go to sleep. Get up, stand up, turn around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, lay back down, go back to sleep, and in the morning, you'll see what you see. In the morning, the little old lady got up, and to her surprise, her eyes got huge, and she looked. What was there? Why, she was living in a nice little house that had gingham curtains at the windows, flower boxes, and a post office box right outside her door, a mailbox. She was so happy. And she was so busy looking at her new home that she forgot. But you know what she forgot? She forgot to say thank you. Well, the little fairy was a little bit dismayed and a little bit put out, but she went flying away anyway. She went flying to the north and to the south and to the east and to the west, doing the things that fairies do for a whole year long. Then she remembered the little old lady, and she decided to go back and visit her again. Well, when she went back, to her surprise, the little old lady again was crying, oh, woe is me, woe is me. I deserve better than this. Why? I should have a mansion. I should have a mansion that has a garden and has footmen to take care of me and a carriage. I should live in a mansion with servants. Well, the fairy said, well, this is what you do. I want you to, tonight, go to bed, lay down, go to sleep, wake up, get up, turn around 3 times, 1, 2, 3, just like that. Lay back down, go back to sleep, and in the morning, you will see what you see. Well, the next morning, the little old lady got up, and her eyes got even wider this time. Wow, now she lived in a mansion. Oh, it was a beautiful mansion. It was brick, and she had servants, and she had everything that she could possibly want, even carriages to take her back and forth, and footmen. And she was so busy admiring everything and also adding some airs to herself now because she thought she was a fine, fine lady. She was so busy acting like that, being a fine lady and looking at everything that you know what she did again? Oh my goodness, again, she forgot to say, thank you. Now the fairy was beginning to be very upset about this situation, but she would let it be the way she would let it be, and she flew away and went north, south, east, and west the way fairies do, flying around for a year. And she remembered again the little old lady, and she decided she'd go and visit her. Surely the little old lady now would be happy with the fact that she lived in a mansion. But when she got there, the little old lady was again crying and lamenting and saying, oh, woe is me. I'm a fine lady now, and I should have much better. Why, I think I should live in a castle. The fairy thought, a castle? The little old lady, a castle is what I should have now. I should live in a castle and I should be queen. The fairy said, okay, now go to bed, lay down, go to sleep, get up, turn around 3 times, lay back down, go back to sleep, get up in the morning and see what you will see. The next morning, the little old lady got up, and sure enough, now she had a crown on her head and she lived in a castle with tapestries on the wall and a moat around the castle. She had everything the fairy thought that she could possibly want. And now she was acting very uppity and very snooty like a queen of everything. Well, she forgot again to say thank you to the fairy. And the fairy was becoming more and more disappointed with the little old lady. But she flew away north, south, east, and west, just the way fairies do. And for a whole year, she stayed gone. Finally, she decided she'd look in on that little old lady again just to see how she was doing. And when she got there, to her total dismay, the little old lady was again crying, oh, woe is me. Why, I should be better than this. I should be not just the queen of here. I should be the queen, the king of everything. I should be in charge of everything and have the grandest castle and rule over the whole world. Well, the fairy looked at the little old lady and said, okay, then this is what you do. Next morning, go to sleep tonight, lay down, go to sleep, get up, turn around 3 times, go back to sleep, get up in the morning, and you will see what you shall see. The little old lady did exactly that. She laid down and went to sleep, stood up, went around 3 times, just like she had done before, laid back down, went back to sleep, got up the next morning and opened her eyes and, oh, guess what? The little old lady found herself back in her vinegar bottle. What just goes to show, if someone does something nice for you, you should always say thank you and be grateful for what you have. And that is the end of that story. Now, you know, all stories in Fairyland are not just about fairies. Fairyland has elves and has brownies and has leprechauns and has giants. All the magic people live in Fairyland. And now I will tell you about my friend Clancy O'Grady. Clancy O'Grady is a leprechaun of the finest kind of leprechauns. And now everyone knows, well, maybe not, so I'll tell you about leprechauns. Leprechauns always have a pot full of gold. Most everyone knows that. And one of the other things is, if you ever catch a leprechaun and you hold on to him tight and don't let him go, he has to tell you where his pot of gold is. But if you let him go, he doesn't have to tell you where it is. He can just escape, and that's the end of that. Well, one day my friend Clancy, who happens to be a shoemaker, why, he was over behind a hedge and he was making a pair of shoes, a nice pair of shoes. And he was having such a good time. He was singing to himself, having a little drop of tea, and working on the shoe. Clickety-click, click like that, working on his shoe. And it just happened that Tom O'Malley happened to be walking by. Tom O'Malley was a human, and he heard that clickety-click and wondered what in the world that was. And then when he looked over the hedge, to his surprise, there was Clancy O'Grady. Tom knew that if he caught that leprechaun, why, he would be able to make him tell him where his pot of gold was. So Tom very quietly and very gently went over there to the hedge and grabbed a hold of Clancy himself. "Now I've got you, now I've got you," he said. "You have to show me where your pot of gold is." Clancy knew he was caught and knew he was going to have to do what Tom O'Grady told him. And he said, "Okay, if that's what I have to do, I guess that's what I have to do. I'll have to show you where my pot of gold is." And so Clancy O'Brien took Tom O'Malley to where he was going to show him where his pot of gold was. Well, they walked a long time, over hill, over dale, over hill, over dale, throughout the country. Took a long time until finally, well, Tom O'Malley looked around and he said, "Now listen, I want to know exactly where this pot of gold is." And all the while he was holding on to Clancy O'Grady, because you know you can't let the leprechaun go. Clancy O'Grady said, "Well, of course I plan to show you where my pot of gold is, but you have to walk a while. It is going to take a while to get there." And more they walked, over hill and over dale and over hill and over dale. "Now listen," Tom O'Malley is saying to O'Grady, "now listen, I want to know exactly where that pot of gold is." Now, Clancy O'Grady is a very smart and very clever leprechaun, and he was thinking all the while of how he would be able to show Tom O'Malley the pot of gold, but keep him from getting it. He was trying to figure out a way to get out of it. He kept trying to squirm away from Tom O'Malley's hand, but he couldn't do it. Tom O'Malley had on to him tight. Till finally they got to a great field. And in this great field there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of great yellow sunflowers. "This is where my pot of gold is," Clancy O'Grady told Tom O'Malley. "This is where the gold is. All you have to do is dig right here." "And where exactly would I dig?" "Right there, right under that one particular yellow sunflower. That's the place to dig." There were hundreds of sunflowers. And Tom O'Malley did not have a shovel, nor anything else to dig up. He knew he would have to get a shovel, but how could he get his shovel and make sure that he was able to dig in the right place with all those hundreds and hundreds of sunflowers? Well, Clancy O'Grady said, "You can go and you can get a shovel from somewhere close by, and you can come back and you can dig it up." "Well, how will I know which one?" "I will show you how to find the exact one," said himself O'Grady. And he reached down to his buckles, and he had a red ribbon tied on his buckle shoe. He got that red ribbon, and he went there to that one sunflower, and he tied that red ribbon around it, and he said, "And there you go, Tom O'Malley. You know where it is now. All you have to do is go and find a shovel, and you can come back and you can dig it up. You don't need me anymore now that you know where it is." And Tom O'Malley said, "I think that's right. I won't need you anymore. I'll find a shovel and I will dig it up myself." "Go on with yourself then, O'Grady." And so he left my little leprechaun friend. He went as fast away as he could possibly go. And Tom O'Malley, he went looking for the closest house he could find to find a shovel. Sure enough, he found one, and he headed back for that field of sunflowers. Now, leprechauns cannot lie to you. They have to tell you the truth. And O'Grady himself had told Tom O'Malley the truth. That exactly was the right sunflower. But when Tom O'Malley got back to that sunflower seed field, guess what? There wasn't just one red ribbon tied around a sunflower. There were red ribbons tied on all the sunflowers in the whole field. Clancy O'Grady had fooled Tom O'Malley. And you know, I understand Tom O'Malley is still there, digging up each and every one of those hundreds and hundreds of sunflowers with the red ribbon tied around them. Don't underestimate the cleverness of a leprechaun to try to get his gold, because he wants to hold on to it. That's the end of that story. And I've got one more for you. Now, this is a story about the lady who fooled the fairies. Everyone knows that fairies love sweets. They love cookies, they love cakes, they love candy, they love sweets. And the king of the fairies, he had heard about the baker lady who lived down the road. The baker lady who lived down the road was the best baker in all of the land. She made the sweetest, sweetest honey cakes. And the king of the fairies, why, he wanted some of those honey cakes. Well, what he did was he set his fairies to fly and go get the baker lady. They went flying out the window and they went up into regular land and they went and they grabbed a hold of the baker lady and they took her back down to Fairyland to make the king himself some honey cakes. I want you to make me some honey cakes, he said to the lady. The baker lady said, oh, I will be glad to make you some honey cakes, but I can't make honey cakes without the ingredients. I have to have honey and flour and sugar and eggs and all that. That's what I have to make a honey cake. Well, said the king of the fairies, I'll send out and I'll get them. And he sent his fairy people, and they went flying out from Fairyland, and they went to regular land, and they got all those things that the baker lady needed, brought them back down to Fairyland, and the baker lady said, well, that's wonderful. Now that I've got the flour and the eggs and the honey and all that, I can make honey cakes, but I cannot make a honey cake without my big bowl and my big wooden spoon. Okay, said the king of the fairies. And he sent his fairies out again one more time to go and get the bowl and to get the spoon. And he brought them back. Well, they brought them back, and the baker lady put her ingredients in the bowl with the spoon, and she began to stir it up. But she was not happy. She wasn't smiling. She had a big frown on her face, and the king of the fairies said, well, what is the matter? And she said, well, I'm just here all by myself, and when I'm at home, I always have my puppy dog there with me to help me make a cake. He taps his tail on the floor like that, and that helps me keep up the beat in making the cake. All right, said the king of the fairies. Well, I'll send up and get the puppy dog. So he sent his fairies out from Fairyland up to the baker lady's house to grab the dog. And they went flying through the air back down to Fairyland, and there the dog was, with his tail tapping on the floor, and the lady mixing up her fairy cake. Well, very soon the lady wasn't very happy again, and the king said, well, what's the matter now? And she said, well, whenever I'm making my cakes, the dog is there with his tail on the floor, packing it out for the rhythm of making the cake, but I also have my kitty cat with me. She sits there and she purrs, and that helps me be happy and make my own honey cake. Well, all right, said the king of the fairies, and he sent his fairies out again to get the lady's cat this time. Out from Fairyland they went, up to the regular land, got that kitty cat and flying through the air, brought that kitty cat back and took it right back down to Fairyland. Now the lady had her spoon and her bowl and the dog and the cat, but she still wasn't happy. Well, I have the dog and I have the cat, but I don't have my little baby, and my little baby, she just coos, and that helps me make a better cake. You know, that's what makes me bake the best honey cakes in the world. I have to have my little babe. Well, the king was getting a little perturbed with this, but he said, okay, and he sent his fairies out again, this time, one more time. They went up to land, and they got the baby, and they brought the baby back through the air, flying through the air, back down to Fairyland, and there was the baby, just cooing and happy as it could be. Well, the lady's making her cake, but again, she says, I need one more thing. And the king of the fairies says, and exactly what would you need this time? Well, I need to have my husband here. He always helps with me making the cakes. Well then, okay, if that's what I must do. And so the king of the fairies sent the fairies out again. This time they brought in the husband, and the husband came in, flying through the air down to Fairyland. Well, when they got there, the lady starts to make her cake, and the husband says, I have an idea of a way that we can get out of here. What can we do to get out of here? Well, everyone knows fairies don't like loud noises. So this is what I want you to do. Now, when I count to 3, I want everything to start making a noise. I want I'll step on the tail of the dog. You pull the cat's tail. The cat will meow and the baby will cry, and then they'll make so much noise, the king of the fairies will let us free. Sure enough, the lady started mixing up the bowl that she was going to make the honey cakes with. And as she mixed the bowl, she stepped on the tail of the dog and it went, meow, wow, 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 which the cat went, meow, 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 and the baby went, wah, wah, all of them making so much noise, bow, wow, meow, wah, bow, wow, meow, wah, making so much noise until the king of the fairies said, stop. I cannot stand it. I cannot stand all this noise. Everyone go home. And the fairies took everyone back to the baker lady's house. But the baker lady, who was a very kind and gentle soul, why, she made the king a honey cake anyway, and she took it down the path to where the path led to Fairyland. And every month, when the moon was full, the king would find a new honey cake sitting right outside of the door to Fairyland. And the lady, when she came back the next day, would find a small gold coin. You see, they both lived happily ever after. That's the end of the story and the end of fairy time. Thank you so much for coming. Hope to see you again another day. Bye-bye.